Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for having me today. I'm James Hughes from Rubrik. So on the plane up here, I was reading about reading the FT, reading about what's happening in London, what's happening in the markets. And Lloyd's of London, if you're all familiar, is the biggest insurance market in the world. They can put a value, they can put a price on anything. They put a price on Bruce Springsteen's vocal cords. They put a price on Tina Turner's legs. They've even put a price on finding the Loch Ness Monster. But as of the end of March this year, they will no longer be putting a price on cybersecurity and cyber incidents. They deem this now as an act of war, which they've never really insured against. But now it's becoming very, very difficult to put a price on it and quantify the risk that is associated with ransomware. And I see this every single day, and by no stretch or being alarmist, the single biggest threat to any of your businesses at the moment is ransomware. And we see this continuously. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this. So I was speaking to Gartner just before Christmas and asked them, how frequently is ransomware happening? And they published saying that ransomware in the year 2023 is happening every 11 seconds. Now, with our own recovery labs, we're seeing organizations roughly 10 to 15 times a day, some that are hardly affected, some that are completely wiped out and really need help recovering. We've had CISOs and CTOs on the phone physically crying that everything's down. And when the world is going pretty dark, you realize this. So I said, what's happening now then? As we all know, we all work in IT here, things come and go. Things, some things that are problems now won't be problems in the future. And I've always assumed, certainly working for a tech company trying to mitigate this problem, that we'll be working on something else in the next few years. So I asked Gartner, right, by 2030, what do we see happening? And they said ransomware is going to happen, and I thought, it's not going to be a big deal, every 2 seconds. Every 2 seconds now is what ransomware is going to go. So it's 11 seconds now, it's going to be 2 seconds by 2030. And we've seen some pretty high-profile events happening at the moment. The Royal Mail has been very publicly attacked recently. We've also had The Guardian, we've also had JD Sports and various other ones. But it isn't just the ransom that affects the business. It's all the customers. So any ransoms that hit some of our biggest customers, and we're looking after customers now, right, from life sciences to social media to banking to government. And it isn't just the ransom. It isn't just the need to decrypt your data. It's the complete knock-on. There is such a huge ripple effect if you have a massive outage from ransomware. And to prove these guys are actually not just praying and spraying, a lot of it is targeted. And if they are targeting, they're going to get you. Whatever you want to do, they are going to get through. There's a lot of security companies out there going, we prevent ransomware. Well, I got news. They don't. You can't prevent ransomware. But what you can do is make sure that it doesn't affect you as much as it should. And this slide here proves that it's a business behind all of these entities. So there is a lot of state-sponsored stuff, but there's a lot of business entities that are configured just purely to extort the ransom. And a hospital for sick kids in the US was done earlier on in the year. And to prove that they're a business with feedback, with revenue, with P&L things, just like we all have in the real world, they decrypted the sick kids hospital for free, just to prove that they're really, really focused on the bad guys, not here to take out innocent counterparties. So what do we do then as IT people? And I work for Rubrik now, but I spent 20 years working in finance on the customer side, leading tech teams in a FTSE 100. And I joined this little fledgling startup called Rubrik 4 years ago. And what do we do traditionally when we want to protect something? Well, for 1,000 years, we've built bigger walls. Castles started off, we built them thicker, and we built them harder, and we built them faster. But people that are attacking you always have first mover advantage. So to get over all the adversaries, these sorts of things were created throughout the ages to get over walls. And I did a security conference. I did a round table just before Christmas. And I was there with the CISO, and a CISO said, last week, we stopped 140 million attacks, expecting high fives. That means you've got to be right 140 million times. People attacking you have got to be right once. And that's why this problem isn't going away. It's a complete statistical probability that if you're going to be targeted, you're going to be hit. So what are we doing about this financially? Well, when you're doing risk budgets and your risk equations, you do something along the likelihood of an event versus the impact. And generally, if you're going to get hit by something 140 million times, there's a strong likelihood that you want to prevent that. So you're going to put a lot of money into stopping that. And that's exactly what we see in the real world. That's why, on average, most FTSE 100 companies have 105 security tools. It's because you put all your money into the likelihood of something happening. But we don't put enough focus on impact. And we've noticed, 5 to 15% of budgets go through. And this is a uniquely human problem. Because the board goes, right, well, I've read about this ransomware stuff. I need you to be able to block it. You go, yeah, I can block it, but you've got to give me the money, the time, and the resources. So you get all of that stuff. And then you've got to go back and go, but something might still get through. And, that's a uniquely problem that you don't want to convey that message. And generally speaking, we don't have a recovery position. And this is what we're here to talk about, because there's a huge difference between recovery and resilience. With recovery, you're building from the ashes. And we've got a company that I was dealing with, in Germany earlier on in the week said, no, if we have a major outage, don't worry, we've still got tape. Now, this is an online sophisticated business, and they're relying on tape. And they think, that they can just restore tape really, really quickly, and it's going to be fine. But you can't. Your tape's in a bunker miles away. Yes, tape is absolutely secure. But if it takes you 4 days to recover from ransomware, then that isn't going to be great for your business. Hackney were hacked 2 years ago, and they're still recovering now. Hackney Borough Council in London, they had ransomware 2 years ago, and they're still building services now, 2 years later, and they relied on tape. What we think you need now is be much more about resilience, much more about business resilience. And when we're working with entities, we talk about practicing in peacetime so that you're prepared in wartime. Because if you go through a ransomware event and you haven't practiced it and you don't know what you're doing, the world goes pretty dark pretty quickly. And I've got first-hand experience of this, a lot of this. So we want you to be in the resiliency game, that if you do have ransomware hits you, it's fine. You can recover quickly. You may not be running at 100%, but you are still running. If you're relying on recovery, you are rebuilding from the ashes, and no business these days functions at that sort of speed. And what we also find is that cyber teams and IT teams don't always work together. They can be two completely separate entities that come together at management meetings, but generally speaking, they can even fight against each other. We're also noticing a weird dichotomy in the real world that as infrastructure teams move a lot of their workloads to the cloud, all that space left in data centers is being taken up by InfoSec teams with all of their servers running all of their tools. Since you end up with 105 different tools. InfoSec teams and tech teams have to work together. And again, if you're going to create a resilient organization that can survive ransomware and get through this properly, you need a team that can work together. Now, I'm sure lots of you are using the NIST model in the room. We use NIST, and we align our products very closely with NIST, particularly if we're working with the US government and the UK government. It's a shared responsibility between the CISO and your CTO to identify that there's a problem. Generally, and this is the CISO at the top here, then the CISO's job is to prevent it and then detect it. But responding is very much a unique, very much a joint effort. And IT guys generally are much better prepared to respond to a major incident than security. IT guys have been doing this for years. They've been breaking stuff for years. They've been recovering stuff for years. The IT service management process, ITIL, so on and so forth, that's a very, very mature process, completely drawn about by IT guys breaking things. InfoSec, for the very first time, has got proper skin in this game, and you've got proper ability to recover. And that's what we want to do at Rubrik. So we think you absolutely should have all of your security tools. You absolutely should have firewalls, XDR, CASBs, SIEM source. You should have all of those tools. Absolutely keep them. They are providing an awful lot of value to your organizations. But you need more. And we've created something called data security, because you absolutely must protect your data. And in a world where you can automate everything, and we think infrastructure and cloud systems are fungible, you can create them. They should be automatically created. That's the design of infrastructure in the world of 2023. What you can't create is your data. The one thing that separates all of your organizations from each other is data. And I'm in this amazingly unique position now where I get to see organizations across every single sector. And broadly, infrastructure, cloud setups, models, they all have a lot of similarities, a lot of overlap between every system these days. But data is what absolutely makes your organizations unique. And let's be honest, data is the one thing that all of these ransomware gangs, as well as state-sponsored ransomware, is going after. They're not going after your infrastructure. They don't care about your firewalls. They don't care about your servers. That's all fungible. That all gets recreated on the fly. Your data is the one thing that will cripple your entire business. So that's what Rubrik is about. We focused entirely on data security. And again, when I joined this firm 4 years ago, I joined a fledgling little 300-person startup. We're now 3,000 people with nearly 6,000 customers all over the world. And we are really, really building a data security environment. So if you put this in line with your NIST principles, this is where we play. And this is where we think everyone should be playing. So first of all, you need to be able to identify. If you have the world going dark, the very first question you've got to ask is, what's down? What data is being affected? And there's a lot of times that you've got so much data out there. And again, ransomware exploded during the pandemic because you had the holy trinity of market segmentation. You had a lot of people that were vulnerable. You had an anonymous cryptocurrency that was exploding. And there's an explosion of data. No one ever deletes anything because no one really knows who owns it. And what we see in real life as well is people own data, then they leave organizations, all that data left behind, no one wants to delete it because no one knows what it's doing. It's all there propagating. It's all there as a target for ransomware. So if you've got a platform like Rubrik that can span across all of your data centers, all of your cloud, all of your SaaS, in no matter what country, no matter what jurisdiction, no matter what SaaS app, particularly with Microsoft, then we get this lens where we can see across all of your data sets. That enables us to build a really amazing picture about what your environment looks like. It also means we can build a really good picture about what a normal day in your environment looks like versus what an abnormal day in your environment looks like. And if you've got anomalous changes happening deep in a folder and a folder and a folder, that's very, very difficult to detect in real world. Plus, those tools add an awful lot of overhead to the performance of your production systems. This all goes against a secondary copy of your data. It's a backup copy of your data. So we want you to be able to help find your data. So if you have a ransomware attack, where did it get to? What's it affected? How is it spread? We can tell you that immediately. It spreads by permissions as well. So if you have ransomware, it's going to go as far as the permissions of the person who executes it allow. So have you got appropriate permissions throughout your environment? We can do breach and simulation tests. We can do wiper attacks, and we can simulate things as well in the preventing area. When we detect ransomware. We detect threat hunting. We do deception attacks. Then we allow you to respond, and then ultimately what we're here to do is help you recover. So going back to the don't recover, be resilient, that's what we allow you to do. So in certain cases, up to the second, we're protecting your data continuously. So if you have something, we'll replay it up to the second, we'll get you back up and running. And that can be on Oracle, SQL, Cloud, VMworld, whatever environment you do. And that's what we're there to do. So if we can protect all your data up to the second, then you should always have a resilient environment. Then on top of that, we'll put a layer of smarts that we call the Rubrik Security Cloud, where we're looking at anomalous behavior, threat hunting, threat responses, and then we'll allow you to do application orchestrated recovery. So what this means is, in an environment, if you want to test how something got through, or you want to do A/B testing, you'd have to spin up a whole dev test environment and be able to replay data. What we do is we can do all that for you. So you press one button, we create a sandboxed environment, we rebuild your environment up on Rubrik, and this scales up to 8,000 servers, so any systems that take out to 8,000 systems to run, we can do it, although we can do it up to from 3 servers to 8,000. It doesn't matter about scale. We can replay attacks in a sandboxed environment, so you can test it on the fly, know that you're protected, then you can do a control failover back to production, and then get running. We also contain threats, so there's nothing worse than if we back up a threat and you're panicking in real world, restoring that threat, then it becomes a cycle. So what we'll do is we'll contain any of that malicious data when you do your recovery, so we're all about keeping you running. And that's been me. Thank you very much for listening.